Hello, my name is Michael Willoughby. I'm a CFA charter holder, and also I earned my PhD in economics from Columbia University. Currently, I'm a member of the faculty at the University of California, San Diego in the Department of Economics. Today, I'm going to take you through macroeconomics for CFA Level 1. Macroeconomics is the oldest part of the study of economics. It goes back to the 18th century, and it is really comprised of the study of the determinants of national income. Because the study of macroeconomics is so old, it has roots classically and neoclassically. Now, national income is today measured as gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is a particular way of measuring the composition and the value of output in the economy today. It has a precise definition, and I've written it down for you. Gross domestic, I've underlined domestic to distinguish gross domestic product from a precursor called gross national product. Gross domestic product is the value of all final goods and services produced and sold domestically at current prices. Let me just distinguish the domestic from the national for you so that you can see the difference between the two. Domestic is value of all final goods and services produced and sold domestically in the United States. Gross national product is the value of all final goods and services produced by any factor of production that is owned by someone in the United States. So it's national to the extent that it's the national factor of production. GDP is domestic because it doesn't matter who owns the factors of production that produce and sell as long as it's done in the United States. Now, GDP is a single number. It's a single number that is intended to some extent to measure the level of welfare and standard of living in a particular country at a point in time. There are a couple of features about GDP that you should be aware of. One is that the GDP quotes that you hear regularly in the news are quotes of GDP at current market prices. That is, they represent the value of all things produced and sold, but at our daily prices, or what we call nominal GDP. Nominal GDP can be deceptive because of the fact that it's measured in current prices. What we really want to know about the economy is how much better it's doing at producing goods and services, not at producing the value of goods and services. Value is only a measure. So the concept of real GDP is the most important economic concept for aggregate economic activity. Real simply means that we're measuring the quantity of output at a level of prices that's consistent, or what we call in a base year, throughout the period of time that we measure it. So it really measures the value at a fixed price level of all goods and services. Secondly, GDP does leave out certain things, and it's important to recognize as much as what GDP has as what it hasn't. Let's look at that. Here are some important exclusions from GDP. Number one, it does not include the sales of any used items. You can see clearly why that's going to be true, because used items are not produced in the current year. They've been produced in prior periods, and it's in the prior periods that the production of used items today would have been counted in GDP. So it doesn't include used items. It doesn't include anything that's non-market. Anything that's non-market, of course, isn't going to be measured at any price at all. So this means that GDP does not include the value of, say, household services or any non-market activities such as leisure. Certainly most of us spend a good deal of our time in market activities in order to earn leisure. The value of that leisure is only counted in the market activities that are used to produce the free time for leisure. GDP does not include any transfers. So what are not included in GDP are any payments from the government for unemployment, for Social Security, for pensions and other things, because these transfers will already have been counted in something else that's been produced and sold. And lastly, GDP does not include price appreciation. So to the extent that the housing market in the United States has been relatively busy and healthy, and housing prices have appreciated, the price appreciation, indeed any capital gain, changes in stock market prices, etc., are not going to be included in our measure of GDP. Just goods and services that are produced and sold at current market prices this year. Now, a moment ago I mentioned how we separate the two measures of GDP, nominal GDP at current prices and real GDP at a base or fixed level of prices at some point in the past, in order to differentiate between the value we produce today and the actual quantitative increase that we've produced at a base level of prices. Let's look at prices for a second and how we measure the level of prices so that you can see what's behind the nominal GDP as well as the real GDP. The first is the CPI. The CPI stands for the Consumer Price Index. It is put together by the Department of Labor as part of their Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the CPI is built from a basket of goods and services. Now, by a basket, what I mean is that there are about 400 goods or services in this basket over about 7 groups. The 7 groups being things such as housing, transportation, food, clothing, healthcare. And these 7 groups give us about 400 actual goods. They are measured by about 1,000, a survey of about 1,000 items. So to give you an example, sometime about 10 or 12 years ago, beer was introduced into the CPI basket. So beer is one member of the food group, but beer itself is generic, so when the prices of beer are measured for purposes of determining the price index, several different types of beer in that category of 1,000 products are used to come up with that indexed price for beer. Now, within the basket are weights. So each of the 7 groups, indeed each of the items, of the 400 items within the 7 groups, is given a weight. That is, how much relative to the other 400 goods should the weight of that price be in the basket of goods that contributes to the index. Now, the CPI gives us a measure of current or nominal prices within a basket of goods. So the CPI is itself a measure of the increase or decrease in a general level of prices, as general as those 400 items, at nominal prices. Now, in order to get a feeling for what the real GDP is, we can't use a measure or even an older index of CPI prices, because the CPI only includes about 1,000 items. We have to use what's called the GDP deflator. A GDP deflator is simply a level of prices in a base year which we use to divide into any current year GDP, and that effectively deflates it. The deflator will then give us real GDP. Let's go back to the CPI for a second. Based